And as the room begins to fill, I'm just going to go ahead and jump into all of our housekeeping pieces. So, hello everyone. My name is Sasha Sensor. I'm ANCOR's Director of Education, and I'm so thrilled today to welcome you to our last community conversation of 2025, which is All Ages, One Team, a community conversation about leading a multi-generational workforce. So, our housekeeping items are pretty traditional around here, especially if you've joined us for a number of our other community conversations. The first one is please note that this conversation is being recorded. And this recording, along with any other materials that Dr. Kelly might want to provide us at the end of the conversation, will be provided to you all next Monday through the ACC. The second major housekeeping item we have is that Zoom has lots of options to make this accessible to those of you who use closed captioning. So if you look at the bottom of your screen, you could see the traditional CC icon in a square, or you might have to hit the More button. And when you select that More button with the three dots, you'll be able to choose the Enable Captioning technology. Please be aware that this is all AI driven, and this is one of those places where AI tends to make more mistakes than humans. So there will be an occasional error that we hope that you will excuse. And last but not least, in all of our community conversations, it's going to go deep. It's going to be fun. You're going to have some moments where you're feeling the vibe, and we encourage you, as always, to make sure to use those reaction buttons at the bottom of your screen. Alonzo and I will have a great conversation with each other, but knowing how you all are reacting will help us pace and have an even better time. So please feel free to use those buttons. And then finally, as we get started, let's talk about where we're going to be today because you're going to want some questions at the end and we're going to want to answer them. So make sure to use that question and answer feature at the bottom of your screen. And then last but not least, we love good conversation in the chat. So don't be afraid to use it amongst the panelists, amongst ourselves. Just make sure that we keep it in the positive manner that we're keeping the conversation going today. All right, so let's get started. Today's conversation is something that we live every day in IDD services, which is working across generations. From those who helped build the field to those who will reimagine it in ways that we can't even imagine at this point, we are finding ourselves in a time of a true multi-generational workforce. We're not just talking about people born in different decades. We're talking about people who entered this work at very different moments in the story of disability rights and community inclusion. So, if we think about it, traditionalists were shaped by the early days of deinstitutionalization. Many remember when the Willowbrook expose led to such a public conscious change that we were able to see more community inclusion efforts than ever before. Or when the Education for All Handicapped Children Act was signed, they taught us that belonging isn't about a policy, it's a promise that we have to keep working to ensure that our members and those that we support have true community inclusion. Many baby boomers worked really hard to carry that promise into action, and they built early provider organizations, advocacy coalitions, and family movements that made community inclusion the norm. They remember the birth of home and community-based services and the first wave of people coming home. However, Generation X came in at a different time and place. They came in during a period of consolidation and reform. They helped professionalize service delivery, establish quality assurances, and navigate the rise of Medicaid waivers and managed care. They were the bridge between mission and measurement, translating values into more productive systems in order to better serve individuals with IDD. Then came along millennials who entered a field rich in history, but under new pressures to modernize. They brought energy around technology, trauma-informed practice, and person-centered thinking. And many came in after Olmsted affirmed community living as a civil right, and that legal clarity became a moral compass for many. Then we have Generation Z, who's in the process of crafting their professional legacy, a legacy impacted by an early fire to embed inclusion and equity into the world around us. And they remind us that belonging also means representation, well-being, and voice. And finally, coming up behind them is Generation Alpha, still in the classroom, still forming their sense of self, but already living in a world where universal design, accessibility, and neurodiversity are common parts of everyday language. So when we bring all of these generations into the same space, whether that's a team meeting, a leadership program, or a Zoom call just like this one, we're bringing together the living timeline of our field. So the question isn't whether differences exist. Of course they do. The real question is how we draw on each other's generational memory and imagination to lead in ways that keep belonging at the center of our work. And that's the question at the heart of today's conversation. Our guide for this conversation is someone who always brings love, laughter, and depth, a combination that this field understands well. Many of you will remember him from the main stage in Chicago, where he challenged us to think differently about how we lead, how we listen, and how we grow. Or those who have not yet had the privilege of holding space with him, please let me introduce you to the fabulous Dr. Alonzo Kelly. Dr. Alonso is a strategic leadership partner, an executive coach, professor, and best-selling author whose work has reached people and organizations around the world, including nonprofits, universities, and numerous Fortune 500 companies. His focus is helping leaders translate good intentions into action through strategic thinking that moves people and organizations towards what matters most. He's guided thousands of individuals through transformation and delivered training on 4 continents. But what makes Alonzo's work resonate here isn't the scale, it's truly his heart behind it. So, as Alonzo would say, it takes 2 generations to forget and 3 generations not to care. It takes 2 generations to forget and 3 generations not to care. One more time. It takes 2 generations to forget and 3 generations not to care. That idea that our sense of purpose and possibility across generations sits right at the heart of today's conversation. So, Alonzo, before we go ahead and do an even deeper dive, I just want to say that I'm so glad to have you back with us, and I'll give you a moment to say hi to so many of their familiar faces in this room that I know you can't see, but I assure you are here and present.
Well, first, let me say I might not that I'm poaching you from the organization, but I appreciate the intro. Make me sound cooler than I really am. Second, hi everyone I can't see. So let me just say this right out the gate. I do my best work in spaces where I feel safe. And it's not the physical part I'm talking about. So as of this second, I see there's over 70 people in this elevator with me. So if you would indulge me on this safety check, that would be awesome. If you have the ability, would you throw in the chat the one word that describes how you show up right now? Like, how are you showing up right now? Like, right now, I'm showing up curious, bold, because, we're all in this elevator, and I want to know who's in this elevator with me. Eager, interested, open-minded. Okay. Questioning, I'm definitely with that. All right. Thank you for that. Somebody got greedy. Davina, she put two, open-minded and fabulous. Who am I to argue?
Yeah,
Um,
I wouldn't argue with fabulous today. I'll take some of that.
so I will ask that all of you hold me accountable during this conversation for things I'm sharing, experiences I've had, or the way that I understand it. Hold me accountable in the chat in a non-weaponized way, and I'll explain that later. But thanks for sharing your time, everyone.
Awesome. So I think that's going to lead us kind of into our first formal question, my friend. Because in IDD services, we often see that there are cycles of memory and meaning, right, every day. In particular, in the stories we tell, in the systems we build, and the values that we pass forward. So, as we explore how these 5 generations are working side by side in our very mission-driven work, we've got some questions for you about what that statement, it takes 2 generations to forget and 3 generations not to care, really means, because it stays with people.
Yeah.
In our field, right, history isn't abstract, it's personal. And I think when we work alongside people who remember what it meant to fight for community living, while also welcoming new colleagues who have never known anything else but our current standard of inclusion. So let's start there. What
Yeah.
does that saying mean in the context of IDD leadership, and how do you see it showing up in our workplaces today?
Love the question. So here's how I'm going to answer it. I'll answer it in three parts, which is in my learning style. So I'll start with this. There's six different ways to learn: read, write, listen, speak, think, and role play. Read, write, listen, speak, think, and role play. So I'm in an elevator full of leaders. So I'll start with that. All of us do not learn the same, and one is not better than the other, right? I am a visual learner. So I'm going to explain two generations to forget and three to not care, rooted in how I understand it. So in a visual way. So I'm a mama's boy. I talk about my mama a lot. No shame in that. Mama's grandma. Mama was born in 1928 in Philadelphia, Mississippi. Thanks for all the hearts. Okay. 1928. Can we agree Mama studied World War II? You got to say yes, right? She gives birth, my grandma gives birth to my mother in 1950. Yes, my mother studied World War II, but not like her mom. My mother knows way more about Vietnam than she knows about World War II. I was born in 1974, so I am 51. I'll be turning 52 soon, next month, right? 2 months. I don't even know anymore. Okay, but I'm 51. I studied World War II. Not like my grandma. I know way more about Operation Desert Storm than I know about World War II. So I'm going to pause for a second. Everybody stick with the math. Not the war, but the math. Mama studied World War II. My mother studied Vietnam. I studied Operation Desert Storm. I also studied World War II, but not like my mom. My generation has children. So here's what I got. Here's what we got. We got a 23-year-old daughter, an 18-year-old son, and an 8-year-old son. We can talk about that math later. Okay, but let's focus on the 23-year-old, right? When she was in high school, yes, she studied World War II. Not like her grandma. My daughter knows way more about September 11th than she knows about World War II. It takes two generations to forget, three to not care. I just shared with you I have an 8-year-old son. Look me in the fake Zoom elevator eye and tell me you believe my 8-year-old son is going to care about World War II in 10 years. Here's the problem. When my 8-year-old is in the presence of his grandparents and his great-great-grandparents, this is how he's greeted. You kids don't care about nothing. And that's when Alonzo jumps in front of the kid, because I'll defend the kid every time. You don't get to talk to kids like that in my space. They do care, just not like you.
Hmm.
Because I'll challenge everybody in the chat right now, and I'm going to ask you to be honest. How many of you woke up caring about the dinosaurs? Be honest. Now, does it mean you're anti-dinosaur? Does it mean you don't care about dinosaurs? Or does it mean you don't care? Two generations to forget, three to not care. But I bet when you go to the museum, you see a dinosaur and you go, that's cool,
Yeah,
right? So
absolutely.
we've got people in our workspace. Okay, Dorian, I love dinosaurs too. I just didn't wake up thinking about them. I didn't wake up today and be like, oh, I bet you the pterodactyls would hate it outside today. It's freezing in Green Bay.
I gotta tell you, Alonzo, I love dinosaurs up until the point that my dinosaurs were, I was told, didn't actually exist. So, like, a little bit of disillusionment. So, like, even my experience of dinosaurs is going to be different than
Right.
a young person's experience of dinosaurs because the ones I fell in love with apparently aren't real. So,
Right.
yeah.
So here's an accountability test for everyone. And the good news is you're on your honor because no one here is going to check your work, right? So if you have a pen next to you and something to write on, I'm going to ask you to draw something for me, okay? And and if you don't have a pen, just use your finger pen in the air. Okay, you ready? Everybody take a deep breath. Take a deep breath. Please draw for me a capital cursive letter Q. Capital cursive letter Q without Google. Thanks, Charlene. How many of you are looking at me crazy right now and I just can't see it? So imagine if I laid into you about how come you don't know cursive? Or okay, Cassandra, there's always that one in the room that knows everything, right? I'm messing with you, right? But what do I do if you can't remember how to draw something that I understand many of us a certain age spent the whole semester learning how to do? How many generations ago did you stop caring about cursive or start to forget? And that's what I'm talking about. So, as a person who doesn't like labels, like I can't stand that we label the generations, even though I understand it. What if we didn't have call it a label problem and turned it into a math problem? It's a math problem. And what if we removed all words of moral judgment from the conversation?
Hmm.
So what if nothing's good or bad or right or wrong, right? Here would be a critical thinking exercise question for everyone, right? That we can do or not do right now. If I were to ask you, how has the concept of respect evolved across 5 generations? And you were not allowed to use the word good or bad or better or worse or up or down, how would you describe it?
Alonzo, I think as they start thinking about that, that's a great place for us, as I know, to transition. So I'll tee you up so you
Mhm.
can talk about the respect part and we can move into, I think, the next part of our conversation, which is when you're talking about these cycles of remembering, where do you see them playing out specifically in human services? And I know that this is a great place where you can tie respect and that concept together.
Yeah, so you started out with the history of um, from a policy perspective, how we've evolved, how we see, receive, and respond to people in our communities. That's evolved from what we call people to how we treat people to what we think about in terms of the future. How do we serve people, right? I'm going to put all that in the respect bucket. The concept of respect has evolved. Now, where I would challenge your thinking is if you say it's gotten worse. Here's why. What I'll also say is every generation inherits a truth about the world. They inherit the truth. So I would hope we can agree um, that in the amount of time we've been in this space, there have been some babies born somewhere on the planet, right? Is the world good or bad to that baby? To the baby? Or is it just is? So, with every interaction that happens with that baby is internalizing and holding on to that data. That's how we do it here. However, you talk to that baby is how we do it here. However, you hold, however, you treat, right? So, so what happens to land the plane on this? My understanding for learning how to read is you learn to read to the third grade. You read to learn fourth grade on. Learn to read, read to learn. So follow me on this short story for a second, right?
Yeah.
And all of you can judge my parenting later. So do you remember the Pavlov experiment with the dog?
Of
The dog
course.
rings a
Yes,
bell, gets a treat, right?
absolutely.
So I have the Pavlov experiment in my truck with my youngest. Okay. He's learning to read, right? So this is how it goes. Someone did it with rats. All right. This is how it works in my truck. As we're going down the freeway, my 8-year-old son, if he gets a word right on a sign, I flick him a cookie. So this story is like it's just like 3 years old now, right? But
Yeah.
but this is how he learned to read. So if you can get that word right while I'm doing 80, 65, this is recorded, right? Doing the speed limit. If he can get that word right on a sign, I flick him a cookie. So we're going down the road and he goes, bar, cookie, store, cookie, McDonald's. Bro, you didn't read that, but cookie, right? Right? You see how that goes, right? So now everybody just in your head, repeat after me. Funny till it's not funny.
Funny till it's not funny.
Funny till it's not funny. Okay. Up here in Green Bay, Wisconsin, which is where I live, we have a gentleman stenciled out on the back of his truck. F your feelings. But it's spelled out. I'm going to respect our space, right?
Appreciate that. Yeah.
I see that truck at the next light, and I got my son in the car, and I just described the game we play. As we get closer to the truck, I'm like, please go through the light. Please go through the light. And the universe is like, nah, I think I want to play.
Mm.
Of course, he doesn't go through the light. Of course, I end up right next to the truck. Here's my question for you. When my son reads that first word right, do I flick him a cookie?
Isn't that a moral dilemma?
The
Or
answer,
maybe
the
not.
answer is yeah, everybody's doing it. Yes.
Okay.
He's learning to read. He's
Right.
learning to read, right? Okay. Funny till it's not funny.
Y'all.
First day of first grade, teacher's going through all the rules and ends it with, please don't break these or to hurt my feelings, to which my son responds,
F your feelings.
yeah.
Yeah, funny till it's not funny.
So here's my question. Is my son disrespectful? Everybody's going no now. Well,
I
can we
don't think the
agree?
teacher's going to say that.
Can we agree that the concept of respect has evolved? You don't get to say my kid is bad. None of us learned how to read off that phrase. Lakia, if I'm saying your name right, she says, yes, because you didn't teach him right. I will hold space for that. It's possible I didn't teach him right.
Or it's also the moment that we're talking about two different teachable moments, right? You get a
Hmm.
cookie, but we also
Hmm.
pause and say, let's talk about that word,
Yep.
you
And
know?
I appreciate Lakia holding me accountable. You were
Yeah.
supposed to tell him in the moment. In the moment, he just read the first word. In class, he repeated a phrase, and now I
Mm,
can't go anywhere
yeah,
without seeing the phrase. But my point is, when we were growing up, those weren't bumper stickers.
right.
So if I take this to the workplace in human services, I've got 5 different groups of people who understand the concept of respect a different way.
Hmm.
My grandparents, they could cuss each other out at work and then go to the bar and buy their boss a beer. I double dog dare you to cuss your boss out today. Please
No,
don't do that.
no.
We will argue amongst ourselves on which generation has the hardest work ethic. And I'm not even sure how to have that argument.
Mm. Well, and I think what you're talking about, right, is that respect and these moments, they're all evolved from the stories that we interpret from the snapshots that we're experiencing in life, right? So if we think about those moments in time as stories and how we interact with them as stories, there are these spaces where however you interpret that story, how you see that story, we can all, same thing, go to a movie and like take away a completely different experience. But
Right.
stories are what ground us as humans. And you've shown that because we've talked about it throughout, like from the very beginning of this conversation. So, where I want to bring that back to is that we have a lot of organizations that have stories about who they are, and what they envision themselves to be, right? So I think about this in a world where the people who started an organization had a very distinct vision, set of values and principles, things like respect that they were bringing to the table. But as those leaders move on, the memory, as you're talking about, begins to fade or maybe it's renewing, but it's not done intentionally. So I think many of us in IDD services see that when newer staff don't know the why between a practice that's been happening for a long time. And they sometimes assume, right, that the system is outdated rather than asking the full story. In the same way, the teacher would be like, if you were curious, the question would be,
Right.
where did you get that concept from, or where did you hear that phrase, right?
Right.
Why do you think that's the right thing to say to me today? Versus what you were saying about a moral judgment reaction of you asked, is this good or is this bad? Was my son right or was my son wrong in that moment? And I think asking that question, right, is it's a reminder that like leadership isn't just about strategy, it's about the stewardship of memory. And
Yeah.
so, what does it look like when an organization is clinging to old stories as a way to interpret new things, or old stories that other people, that the world has changed enough that maybe those concepts are no longer serving it, but they're there for a reason, right? Does that make sense?
Right. It does. And I also see Stacy's question of the why, right? So let's break this question down a little bit. We're having a leadership discussion, and I want everyone to know I see everyone in the organization as a leader.
Right.
You're either the leader of a task, a leader of a team, a leader of other leaders, or the leader of a system. The leader of a task, you're the one that unlocks the door. The leader of the team, the first shift supervisor, a leader of other leaders, the director of whatever that has leaders report to them, or the leader of a system. So let's start there. Everyone's a leader. Now, in my experience, leaders of tasks and leaders of teams, their thoughts are dominated on two questions: how and when.
Hmm.
How and when. Leaders of other leaders and leaders of systems, their time is dominated thinking about what and why. So be me for a second. I walk into your organization. I don't know anybody's role. I don't know what anybody does other than the people who invited me. What you may not realize I'm doing is I am inventorying where I'm guessing I would find you on that scale based on the questions you're asking. So the leader stands up and says, so here's what we have to get done today. And somebody raises their hand and they go, when is that supposed to start? I go, okay, you're pretty close to the end user on this. Or how does that work? Or how is that supposed to happen? Or when is that due? So we'll have a lot of what and why people having conversations with how and when people and completely ignoring that. So we'll spend the whole meeting explaining why this is important to a group of people who just can't wait to you to get to the point of when does it start? And I
Now,
do think that plays in.
well, I think so too. And it's interesting that you talk about positionality. I think as I've experienced it in some of the workplace, sometimes it's about um, how many organizations have you worked in? How far have you traveled from home? What are some of the things that you are comfortable with? Because Alonzo, I mean, We've all seen those meetings where there are people in the roles that you've described, right? Who have
Hmm.
done the exact opposite, and the room is so uncomfortable. When the people we think are supposed to be asking the how questions are asking the why questions,
Yep.
and those at in that positionality are saying, "How dare you ask the why question?" Like,
Yeah.
and that I think going back to what you were saying earlier about respect. So what do we do if it doesn't follow that
Yeah.
necessary or common practice and pattern?
I feel like there is an experiment done. I'm not going to get into the argument of who did it first. So, University of Wisconsin, or there was a university in California, I believe. The short version of the experiment goes like this. And don't call PETA on me. It wasn't my experiment. But researchers put a ladder in an empty room, a ladder that you climb, like to change light bulbs, and put some bananas on top, and then put 10 monkeys in the room. And what happened is, as soon as the monkeys saw the ladder with the banana, they went to the ladder. But what they didn't know is every time a monkey touched the ladder, there was a water hose and they'd spray all the monkeys. Now, we say monkeys are intelligent. They're not just smart, they're also intelligent. So it didn't take very long for them to know we don't do it here. We don't touch ladders here. Can we agree there's a culture now in that room?
Hmm.
None, we don't touch ladders. So they removed one of the nine, put a brand new monkey in there. As soon as the brand new monkey saw the ladder, it did what monkeys do, right? Went for the ladder. The other nine stopped it. The question is, does the new monkey know why? Doesn't know why, but how long does it take it to understand we don't do that here? What ended up happening is they kept replacing one of the new monkeys with a one of the old monkeys who does know why with an original monkey who doesn't. They replaced all 10 monkeys. None of them ever went for the banana, but none of them know why. So to answer Stacy's question, like why from new hires in a generation, I'm actually going to start with do your own people know why before we bring anybody new in? So like I would never call a human being a monkey, but I would also say to you, it would also be true that the monkey experiment pops in my head sometimes when I ask people, hey, why do we do it this way? And their answer is, I just started. Okay, well, who trained you to do it that way? I hope if there's a Bob in here, I'm not anti-Bob. We'll pick on the name Bob. The new hire goes, well, Bob trained me that way. So I go to Bob, Bob, why do we do it that way? Not that we're doing it wrong, but why? And Bob goes, well, I've worked here for about 20 years. That's the way we've been doing it since I got here, Alonzo. How far back do I have to go
Hmm.
to understand it's because we all got sprayed with water?
I think what you're bringing up is that one way that we can all lead in a space of a multi-dimensional workforce, right, is to never assume that anybody knows the why. And so to take the time in spaces and conversations, explaining new concepts, introducing new people, to not be afraid to share the why. But I think one of the things that happens, right, in health and human services is we're always on the go. Like we don't always have the ability to sit and breathe and have the space to think about the why. So it also sounds like what you're encouraging is some intentionality around making sure that in our organizations that the why is just as important and that we aren't putting it as um, a question that is only serving certain people in an organization.
Right. I'm looking at Stacy's question on disc style, right? And I can't help
Mhm.
but wonder, when did we start doing that? There is a generation who inherited, you just do what you're told. You don't question your supervisor. You don't run around asking people why. If they tell you to do it, you do it. And then one day a group of people said, I mean, I'll do it. It doesn't make sense to me, but I'll do it, but I do want to know why. And then another generation said, yeah, I'm not doing it till I know why.
Well, it's interesting because it's the history teacher in me, right? And I won't take up your time and space, but if those of you who want to geek out, really looking at the evolution of the United States from an agrarian into an industrial society and managerial space and what that looks like, all of those things really influenced, what we're doing. And we know that the workforce needs often drive education. So education models change of what is acceptable or not and what those things look like. My 20 years I spent in teaching, the amount of new ideas, right, about how to teach or do something was enormous. And I think one of the things that's hard in these situations, though, right, is we are working amongst living heroes. We are working amongst civil rights leaders who should go down in the history books as some of the most pivotal minds of our generation or our living history, right? About ensuring that people with IDD have the most inclusive lives possible. And so, what do when we find ourselves in a space where we are working with people that deserve honor and respect for the roadmap that they've laid out, but we also need to make space for new and emerging ways of thinking. How do people balance that? Like, we don't want to be in a place where nobody's going up the ladder, or, I mean, maybe somebody decides that they're going to go to a corner and jump over and get the banana from a different direction,
Yeah.
right? They don't need to go up the ladder. But those changes can feel sometimes as if they're disrespectful. And then the unwillingness to consider them can also feel, like you said, disrespectful. So what do we do when we're working within organizations where, like, you have people who deserve to be respected and honored at the top, but we still need new and innovative ideas? And not saying that they're mutually exclusive, because I'm not,
Right, right, right,
right?
right.
But
Right.
sometimes it can happen.
Um, One, I'm modeling it. Just breathe, right? And then think. And let me do this disclaimer. The views expressed on the show do not necessarily reflect the views and attitudes of anybody and everybody who looks like me. Just your brother Alonzo Kelly speaking. So, with that disclaimer, here's what I do in those moments when I find myself stuck. To whose benefit should we not figure this out? And to whose benefit should we figure this out? And what would it cost us to not figure this out? And what would it cost us to figure this out? Like that's what happens with me first. So I think at our core, and I choose to believe this. I don't have to. I choose to believe as an optimist. I think everybody wants the best for the people we serve. The what and the why, I do not think is the question. The how and the when is where we get stuck.
Say
It's
more.
okay. So I choose to believe that we agree that everyone in our community deserves dignity and respect. How do we treat everyone with dignity and respect if I'm going to say I don't have the resources to do so? It's how do I do it? It's
Mhm.
when do I do it? When, and some people, it's when do I have to? It turns into a have to thing. And how much does that cost? And when does that have to start? And when does that ramp have to be built by? So in my mind, I always go like, what would it cost us to not figure this out? What would it cost us to figure it out? To whose benefit is it that we can't see, that we don't figure this out? To whose benefit should we figure it out? That's where I start. I'm going to connect all that to the generation thing, which is the core of our topic. Somewhere along the line, we got instant access to information. That was not the generation. That's not what I inherited. It came later with my generation. So my generation's original carpal tunnel was card catalog. It was not the thumb swipe. It was this. And it cost me to do this because I had to go to the library because my rotary phone didn't let me look up anything on the internet, right? So it was access to information. Now, this is Alonzo being petty on this recorded line. Sometimes I got to remind people Information is not knowledge. I'm going to say it again. Information is not knowledge. I drive a Suburban. I can name you 20 components in my truck's engine. I do not know how to fix it. Just because I can name 20 things does not make me knowledgeable in how it works. But I think what happened over time is we have so much access to information that some people have convinced themselves now that makes them knowledgeable.
Mm.
And now we've got all that in one space. So we as leaders, we stand in front of the room and we say, here's the recommended strategy. And somebody goes, well, I saw in an article or I Googled. Your access to information does not make you knowledgeable. So we have to constantly be calibrating that for one another. Now, if we were in person, I would lovingly put everybody on the spot. So here's a homework assignment on your own. If I do not let you look it up, no Google, how would you define the word disability? No pressure, audience. But if I didn't let you read it to me, how would you define it? We've got minimum 80 people on here right now. Can we agree I'm going to get about 50 different answers?
Yes. As a person who is labeled as disabled, yeah, I think you would. I think you'd get a
Okay.
lot of different eight. Mine is basically the things able-bodied people think I cannot do.
Okay.
That
I've
would be
got,
my definition.
I've got like 90 different answers to that since you can't look it up. So what does it mean that all of us in this space do not share the same definition? Whose fault is that? The inability to perform a task, something that changes the way you do things from someone else, you may need to. So here's how I always answer things, which guarantees I'm right. A little bit of a petty trick I have. If I answer it, my understanding is I'm right. The
Mhm.
problem is everybody starts to answer that way. Here's how I understand it, and here's how I understand it. Okay, norm. So here we go. This one I do want you to answer, if you can. Many of you know, maybe some of you know, I am colorblind. I'm colorblind. I cannot see color. Like I see Sasha on my screen and she's beautiful. And I just want to let you know that my entire screen is like gray. Okay? I don't know if the background's gray, but it's gray. You're wearing gray. I'm wearing gray. Everything's gray. Here's my question to the audience. Do you understand me to have a disability? It's yes or no, or I don't know. I'll give you three answers. I cannot see color. Do I have a disability? Now watch what happens in the chat. See what I mean?
All right, so Alonzo, I get it, right? And I have adopted that because this isn't the first time you've told our audience about the like in my experience, right? In fact, my colleague and I, Andre Floyd, we do a presentation around art and we look at a Pollock painting and demonstrate how our interpretations are completely different because, our understanding and worldviews come from different places. Okay, I honor that. I honor that in the space that I'm entering in our services, right? That there are going to be people who have different perspectives and neither one of them is right or wrong, right? Um, but it comes down, right, I think, to communication and how we communicate what we're saying about when there aren't shared definitions, right? When there aren't those opportunities to figure out how to move forward. So, is one of the things that you're saying about creating better communication is taking the time to level set before you do deeper things to create common vocabulary, common language so that people can better communicate? Or because that can also be generational rhythm. Like, I don't understand my goddaughters anymore. Like, I have, and like the kids who run around the neighborhood, they laugh and they smile, and I universally know they're having a good time. But they will say things, and I'm like, what does that even mean? And like, they know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
So, how do we prevent the communication breakdowns while respecting each other? And I'm sure you can tell us about some of the more frustrating or funniest communication mismatches you've seen amongst people, but you can only laugh sometimes at those in hindsight. How do we prevent them from doing more harm in organizations where people care deeply?
I'm going to recommend a couple things. I'm going to ask everybody to, I want your default to be curious and clarity. I want that to be your default going forward. Be curious and seek clarity. Like this conversation we're having right now on disability and whether or not I have one, right? So if I were to say to you, disable or disability is a concept, it's a concept. The only way then to have a further conversation about it is to ask me how I understand it. And how do you understand it? Like that's where we start. Like be curious, right? And seek clarity. So if your answer is yes, I have a disability, and I say to you, the government defines disabled as unable to perform normal everyday activity without an accommodation. Unable to perform normal everyday activity. First of all, I can't be the only one uncomfortable that the government is responsible for the definition of normal. But be that as it may, if you say, yes, I have one, then I'm going to ask you, name something normal every day that you can do that you think I can't do without help. Please do not say driving. Driving's not normal. Color coordinating clothes is not normal. The ADA has never taken up a case for me because I can't shop for clothes by myself, right? So if you say, no, I'm not, then I'm going to say, great. Let me tell you about the challenges I have in doing everyday tasks because I can't see color, including travel.
Hmm.
Take the blue line to the red line, hop off the red line, take the green line to the airport. Travel in Europe and not be able to see color. Land in Belgium, you'll mess around and end up in Russia somewhere if I gotta follow color-coded lines, right? And
Yeah.
for those of you saying everybody has one, I'm not in a position to argue with you, but we can't all go file for disability either. So where I'm saying like for all of us in this leadership space across generations, be curious, seek clarity because it's all a concept.
So, Alonzo, how does the fact that you are colorblind and see me in all gray, which is great, my hair is coming in at this age fabulously silver. Um, what I'm curious, how does it impact your daily life?
So I get dressed every day on a number system, but I cannot tell you how much I could not care less if my clothes match. I do not care. They're clean. It's what I care about. I do not care. Um, it presents challenges cooking. It presents challenges wayfinding. We'll call it wayfinding. Um, but I can't think of anything normal I can't do. I can do the same things you can do that are normal. I will, to the point, I will never be an electrician. Did you wire your house yet today, Sasha?
No, I didn't. I mean, please don't jinx me. I've had to have so many home repairs this year. So, friend, let's not go there. But yeah, I always wish that there was more curiosity in the world and that we were okay with
Yeah,
people asking questions and being curious.
yeah.
It's something as a child at some point, right? We get told, stop asking questions, or like, it's because I said so. Some of those things transfer for us about in cultures for different people in different times about, is it okay to ask questions and be curious? And so I think
That
as
was not
leaders,
okay for everybody,
it's
though.
not, but if you're a leader,
Yeah,
right? It
Yep.
sounds like what you're advocating for is the responsibility of modeling and accepting that curiosity is a feature that best suits your organization in order to make sure that if we have 5 generations in the workplace, we're not jumping to conclusions. We're not immediately passing judgment. We're stopping and saying, that hit me wrong. Maybe we should like interrogate that in a good way of like being curious about where something is coming from before we make assumptions. Is that kind of what I'm hearing you
Yeah,
in a
that
nutshell?
is correct. It's being curious on how did you understand what I said? Or in your experience, help me understand where answering it that way was okay. Like that's how I'm going to ask it. I wouldn't ask, what were you thinking? I'd go, hey, help me understand in your experience when offering that helped the conversation, right? It's another way. Um,
Ooh, I don't
I'm
want to
laughing at Ashley's comment. I can do those things with accommodations. I'm still not going to be an electrician.
ever. So in a world, right, where we're talking about verbal communication,
Yep.
workplace has evolved when it comes to how we share information with each other, right? So we have a whole spectrum. We have our email warriors. We have our Teams and Slack chat loyalists. We have a few brave souls who will still post messages on the staff refrigerator, thinking that somebody might answer them. But the challenges and maybe the art is remembering sometimes that the fridge is no longer Wi-Fi, or maybe it is Wi-Fi. It's modern, who knows? But in your opinion, if we could retire one mode of communication that you feel like is outdated as a result of so many different types of people living different experiences and different histories in a workplace, what would you cast your vote for? What would be the thing that you say creates the most communication breakdowns rather than breakthroughs?
Wow, that's a great question. And I think I'm being distracted by my bias to the reply all button. Reply all. So here's what happened in my head, just to think out loud so people understand how I show up to the space. I went back to what did I inherit? I inherited face to face and rotary phone. And there were some skills I inherited with the rotary phone. Like, for those of you old enough to remember, do you remember when you could remember 35 phone numbers, no problem?
Yeah, yeah. I
Minimum
remember
30,
3. I got 3 now.
right? Now, we're going to call each other out in a loving way, in a loving way. So you don't have to answer this publicly if you don't want to. If you lost your phone and borrowed mine, could you call your kids without access to your phone? Do you have their phone number memorized? Because I can't, and I pay the stupid phone bill. Like funny till it's not funny, right? So what happened somewhere along the line, we stopped engaging in this contact sport and relied on technology to have conversation. So there's some emotional intelligence that was lost in all of that. So I'm not gonna answer your question. I don't have the, I'm not sure which one I'd get rid of email, get rid of text message. I'm not sure. I'm biased to what I inherited, and I inherited contact sport. If you don't like me, you actually got to pick up the phone and tell me that.
Don't send it in an email. Tell me to my
Yeah.
face.
And don't reply all and put a group of people in it.
I'm going to back you up on the reply all one. Like, sometimes we just need it to be 2 people and not 300, like just
Yeah,
sometimes 2 people need to hash things out amongst themselves.
right.
So, heard, I understood. But I think what you're saying from that, though, is to slow down, right? Technology gave us the ability to get faster and to respond faster and to do things with more immediacy, which a lot of times that doesn't give us time to switch from our heart to our head And so
Yeah.
what it really sounds like you're advocating for is if we have all of these people not only be curious, but curiosity requires, again, that ability to slow down a little bit and pause and think about what the appropriate response time and place is.
Yeah.
And I'm one of those people. I gotta learn to walk away. AI is helping me. Some days, I just throw it in and say, make it sound nice, because I'm not there yet today.
Right.
But yeah, I can totally understand what you're saying. You know, part of this, right, though, is that some of these messages in general, just beyond communication, don't connect. So let's talk about something I'm sure we've all seen or we've all heard, and we're talking about those generational values. And I know we don't want to label things, but when
Mhm.
we talk about communication across generations, we're really talking about more than just style, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about how people experience that power and belonging and what it means to be heard. And that connects obviously directly to leadership because in this field, most of us didn't apply for leadership. So many of the people who lead our organizations grew into it or were thrust into it.
Yeah.
And I know
Yeah.
that changes a little because you're saying everybody can be a leader in every space. And I agree with that. I'm talking about structural leadership in
Yep.
some
Yep.
ways. And
Yep.
so my question is, as each generation has stepped into those structural leadership positions, leadership looks and feels different because those concepts of what a good leader has changed. So, what one generation calls paying their dues, right? Another generation might say that looks like a burnout risk.
Yeah.
One generation or somebody might say that something requires loyalty, while others might experience it as forcing to be stuck in a particular place or staying stuck. So I know you're going to say that none of those is necessarily right or wrong because it's not about putting a moral judgment on something. It's a reflection of when and how we all came up through a workforce. So how do you see these differences influencing what people want from leaders today? So,
Yeah.
if you've been in a structural leadership position for 40 years, the expectation of your workforce probably doesn't look the same as it did 5 years ago, 10 years ago,
Yeah.
15, or when you first started. So, how do you figure out what your team wants from you and how you best
Yeah.
serve yourself and the people who, are working for and with you to advance your mission?
Ask better questions. That's my answer to your question. I think it requires us to ask better questions. So, um, I started out by saying about an hour ago, hold me accountable. What I've learned about that word is it's been weaponized in the workplace, right? If you look up the definition, it reads in a position to explain. That's all it means. But now let's be honest. Show of hands, how many of you have ever received the most accountable employee award? N Nobody. Never even heard of it,
No.
right? I
Mm-mm.
think we should ask better questions. And so what do I mean by a better question? Um, we've weaponized the concept of micromanage. Nobody wants to be micromanaged. I'm not a micromanager. Everybody starts out that way, but I also want you to look at this another way. I think that could be the problem. And here's why I say that. One of my top five most aggravating questions ever asked of me is if I have change for a dollar. I can't stand that question, Sasha. Like it drives me bonkers. So I'm going to ask everybody, please do not mimic my behavior. I am self-employed. I am 6'3", 270 pounds. Okay, athletically built black man. All right, here we go. If you ask me if I have change for a dollar, I'm going to reach in my bag and hand you two rolls of pennies. Am I wrong? What about 95 pennies and a nickel? 90 pennies dime. 85 pennies, three nickels. For dramatic purposes, I'm going to type in the chat how many different ways there are to make change for a dollar. 293. How about this? Can we agree it would be a better question to ask, hey, Alonzo, do you have change for the vending machine? Can we agree change for the vending machine is not the same as change for a dollar?
Well, it's a little better because vending machines don't normally take pennies or,
And it's more explicit to what you need.
right? That's true.
Do you
That's
have change for the parking meter is a different question than do you have change for a dollar? I'm going to challenge everybody, all of us, at whatever leadership level I find you, ask better questions. Don't say things like, hey, can you help me real quick? And then I go, sure. And then you walk me down the hall and show me what you need help with. And then I go, I can't do that. You should have told me that in the office.
so I obviously like we you started out that there were like six different learning styles as part of the
Yep.
conversation. And so I think what you're saying is going back to that generalizations can lead to miscommunications. And so the more that we can do to be explicit in our word choice and what we're asking for and asking questions before we give a response, that will help us better communicate with one another. Because if I said to you, Alonzo, I need to go to the vending machine. I've got 3 quarters. Like, can you give me change for a dollar or a quarter? Like, that's a question with more detail. And I think what you're
Yep.
saying is that details over generalization, whether it's giving instructions for a project, giving reasons for doing something, provides clarity, right? Like, I guess I think about it from the perspective of, um, like a prism, right? Like when light goes in one way, it then goes out and scatters and has all of these reflective components that you don't immediately see. But if
Right.
you don't shine the light into the prism, you don't like give it, in this case, the details that create the question, then you don't see the fuller, brighter picture. So I probably have butchered what you were seeing, but
No,
that's my
no.
visual interpretation of what you're sharing today.
If that's how you learn it, right? I wish because we have so many different understandings and interpretations and inherited truths and forgetting about something different and not caring about something different. I think the best thing we have at our fingertips is curiosity and clarity.
So what do we do, Alonzo, if we work in a place or with people who think that questions are tactical tools to try to undermine you? Like that they think that questions within themselves are weapons or like,
Right.
and I say that because, I don't, so my husband and I have been married for 18 years. And, we went on this trip to Germany together recently. And, you know, I asked him if he wanted a bratwurst, right? Like, this is a pretty simple question. And then he asked me, the response to that question is, well, what is the rest of the day? And I was like, how do it's just in front of us. I'm hungry, right? And he's like, yes, but why are you hungry? I don't know why. We are two, by the way, two neurodivergent humans living in a space together, so our conversations can be really fun. But I think part of that we're talking about here is this notion of we can get the most frustrated we ever get at each other is when we think that the questions are leading questions, right?
Yeah.
Like a lawyer in a show trying to get me to come to like a conclusion
Yeah.
rather than accepting it as curiosity. How do we create that culture change within an organization where questions are okay and welcomed and encouraged?
Yeah. So I'm going to manage the expectation in the 27 minutes we have left. Here's my answer to that. That is a culture shift, and we're not going to weaponize that either. If you look up my understanding of organizational culture is defined as a collection of attitudes, beliefs, rituals, and relics.
Okay.
It's a collection. There's no such thing as a bad culture or a good culture. This is your culture. So if you want to shift the culture, let's do this. New rule. No meeting ends until everybody asks at least one question for clarity. And all of a sudden it becomes this thing where I'm asking because it's what we do here.
Right.
But if that's not something you do, then it's weird. And if it's weird, it's not safe. And if it's not safe, I don't trust you, right?
Yeah. Well, so I'm going to brag on Anchor a little bit internally. One of the things I think is best about our culture is we just recognize each other in the work that we do on a regular basis. So it is not uncomfortable to receive accolades from your teammates because it's just what we do. Like we make the effort to see each other and to call it and to name it and that's not always in every place. So there can be times where people offer you compliments in workplaces and you're like, what do they want? Like, what is it that they need from me, right? And so it's all about making sure, I think you're talking about if it's something we want to model and putting in that repetition into the dialogue. So, I know we're going to open up the floor in just a couple of minutes for some time. So I want to go back though to something we've been talking about, and I think is a good one because it's practical, right? Is like, how can we help emerging leaders? Because we've talked a lot about what leaders
Mhm.
is systemically who are at the top of an organization can do. But people moving into their own roles, how do they help define those new terms of what they want leadership to look like in a workforce where there's multiple generations? Because I think we've all seen that moment when a Gen Z supervisor says, I need to take a mental health day. And there might be a Gen X boss in the room who says, when I was your age, there was no such thing as a mental health day, right? And both of those statements come from a story about survival in the workplace. They both we have to hold space for both because both are lived and true. But how do you create that leadership so that, um, like, what do you do in that situation? Like, how do you find respect for both of those places? And if nobody's right and nobody's wrong, power comes into play. But where's the line that you've been talking about respect and questions?
So mental health days, again, it's very clear people understand how I arrive at the conversation. I'm Gen X, I'm 74, okay? So the what and the why and the how and the when are not in alignment with those after me. I'm not right, I'm not wrong, mine's not better, it's not worse, it's just not in alignment. So I'm not going to argue with a mental health day. What gives me pause is then how you go about addressing your mental health. So as a leader, if I find out you need a mental health day because work is overwhelming, allow me the opportunity to reassign work. That's where my brain goes. So
So
I'm
what you're saying, like the supervisor almost has failed to ask more questions and to provide an opportunity where it's like, I'm I understand you need a mental health day. Are there things here at work that we could be doing to help lighten your load? Is that what you're suggesting?
if that's how you understood it, I'm gonna say yes and. So
Okay, I'll take
um
the yes and.
I'm gonna lean into curious clarity.
Okay.
I do not understand what that means to you. What does a mental health day mean to you? I need to understand that, the what and the why. And then if I said, how about this? How about don't worry about that report today. Can you help me over here with this? It takes you out of the stress that led to you needing that. Can you give me the opportunity to address an alternative how and when? It's just we both have to communicate. And you know what? If your mental health day is because it's something none of my business, then tell me none of my business.
Hmm.
Okay? And I have to be humble enough to accept that. Now, I'm going to find a way to jam this into the conversation. There is a difference between identity-based habits and goal-based habits. And I do think that factors into this conversation a little bit. Identity-based versus goal-based. So I love basketball. That's my sport, right? So I wake up every day and I'm going to shoot 100 shots a day because my goal is to be a starter on the varsity team in high school and to get a basketball scholarship and make it to the NBA. That's my goal. I am convinced there are some kids out here, they just want to be known as a good basketball player. Their whole identity is tied into the things that they're doing. So identity-based goals, in the workplace, somebody might want to be very helpful, super helpful team player because they want to be known as a team player. It's part of their identity, right? They don't want to be supervisor. In fact, if you offer them that opportunity, they're going to say, "No way, I don't want that headache." So I think it's important. It's an important conversation when you started it out with, next generation leaders. I think it's a conversation we all need to have. Talk to me about your goal-based habits and your identity-based habits, and then see where that leads.
So we're heading into the close, folks. I
Yeah,
see that there are no questions right now. So take some time if you have them to ask them. Uh, I'll be honest, we got off a lot of script today, which is fine because we kind of Alonzo and I knew that that might happen. So we're sure we haven't addressed everything you thought you might get out of this session today. And he's already handled a lot of difficult questions for me. So I am sure that he would be open to anything that you all want to ask. So I'll ask one more and
sure.
give you all some time to put those thoughts in the chat. Alonzo. I'm trying to think about all the things that we've come together and talked about in preparation for this conversation. Um, in this field, everything we do relies on relationships. I think so much more than in a lot of other places. It's all relational. So, you've talked about remembering, you've talked about things ending up in a cycle where, like, people won't remember after a certain amount of time. What do you think are some of the key parts that your mama, your grandmama, you, and your kids would say are essential to trust? What would each one of them say is essential to building trust in a workplace that's built on relationships?
Um, I'm typing it in and then I'll explain it. So trust, communication, competence, and contract. That's how I understand trust. Um, let's define communication as when we engage in dialogue, is it both honest and truth? Honesty and truth are not the same thing. You know those people who say stuff like this, "Hey, can I be honest with you?"
Yes.
And then 10 minutes into the conversation, they go, "Okay, fine, you want the truth?" First of all, stop doing that. But now I want to know what the difference is, right? As you're thinking about it, it's like, which one do we demand from you in the court of law? We make you tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. It's interesting how if you're honest in court, I'll object to it. Think about it.
Yeah.
If honesty is how you feel about it, how you interpret it, how what you prefer, that's different than measurable, verifiable data. So I'll trust you when you give me both in communication. Competence, knowledge, skill, and ability. Have the knowledge, skill, and ability, I tend to trust you more. Contract, do you keep your word? So if we as leaders are going to have conversation amongst ourselves about whether or not I trust you, I'm recommending you have one more level conversation. So, Sasha, how are we in our communication? Do I leave you feeling like I was honest and truthful, right? Competence. When I say, yes, I can do this for you, do you leave feeling like I have the knowledge, skill, and ability to do it? If you say, hey, can you do it on December 17th? And I go, yes, I'll be there. Do you trust that I'll honor that contract? But imagine if you just left it at, well, I'd really love to have Alonzo, but I'm just not sure we can trust him yet. And you don't explain that.
Well, I'm thinking about it too from let's talk about expectations in workforce, right? So
Yep.
neurodivergent human, twice autistic human in that particular category. My biggest challenge is not being 100% truthful all the time because my unfiltered truth, like somebody told me it could feel like a boot in the face. So, because that is not the culture or the norm or those types of things, right? So, those are the generation in which we live in, right?
Yep.
Different groups are going to respond to varnishing versus unvarnishing, right? So, I appreciate that about that contract and the communication and the competence, but and I wish that I like you and I were very honest with each other. Hope people see that in our conversation today. And I think we've been able to dig deeper because we're trying to model what we would see in these conversations. But yeah, I'm really scared of that. Like, do
Yeah.
not, like, I have so much trauma built around, okay, Sasha heard, right? Although, when I was with kids, which is fascinating, one of the reasons the kids loved me is they knew I was going, when I told them that they did something well, they knew that I meant it. And I wasn't just praising them for no reason. And when I told them that they messed something up, they understood that I cared, but it was important that I was honest with them. And
Yeah.
I don't always see that transfer as we become adults. So I'll go back, I'll just challenge a little bit like, what do we do when that understanding of communication, trust, expectation, truth is different?
Be curious
Mm,
and clarify. I'm just going to keep coming back to that.
right?
Be curious and clarify. Stacy's asking me to clarify. So like
Yes.
an identity-based habit, if you wake up every day and work out and exercise, you do it so much now that it's just become, you don't even feel right if you didn't do it. It's now become part of your identity. But you're not training for anything. There's no marathon coming up. There's no Tough Mudder. There's no strongman. It's not goal-based. Goal-based habits have a term. I'm doing this with this in mind. Identity-based is I have identity-based habits. I'd like to believe the more I do this, the more people believe I'm a good person. I'm not looking for an award. I'm just a good person, right? And so there are different habits that people engage in. Um, and it shows up in the workplace
Yeah.
too. It does show up in the workplace.
So
You're welcome.
Jessica's got another question for you. So
Sure.
Jessica wants to know, and I think we've gotten to it a little bit, but I think we need to dig a little bit deeper is how do you suggest we find common ground? I know you're going to say be curious. I get
Yeah.
it. But are there conversation starters that you would suggest that help people find something to commonly be curious about
Yeah.
together that are
Yeah.
comfortable to start this work?
Three questions. Three questions I would ask. So, for context, let's say myself and another colleague, generation in either direction, we appear to be stuck. These are the three questions I would ask. What would you recommend? What would it take for us to agree? Can you live with it?
Can you repeat those?
What would you recommend? What would it take for us to agree? Can you live with it? Can you live with it? I feel like that's how we live our lives 99.9999% of the time. You woke up today wanting something for breakfast. What'd you recommend? And then you looked in your fridge, and if you had it, that was awesome. And if you didn't, um, could you live with it? And if the answer was no, then you went right back to number one. Then what are you going to do about it? And if you could live with it, you ate what you had in front of you. It's a natural thing, right? It's just slowing it down. And so when I'm in a meeting or a conversation with someone and we appear to be stuck, with humility, I say, so what would you recommend we do? And what would it take for us to agree? Here's what I recommend. Here's what you recommend. What would it take for us to agree? What would it take for you to agree? And then I go, well, here's the best I can do. Can you live with it? And if they say no, we go right back to number one. Now, I'm not doing this loop all day, but I'll do it a couple times.
Okay.
Here's what my mama would say. Mama would say, it's the start that stops most people. So
Hmm.
what I appreciate about that question is like, how do you start it?
Right. We've got another one is how can I, as a new leader, work to support my team, especially if they are older and have been in the organization longer than I have? This transition is really difficult as a Gen Z who is new to the field. I have more formal education, but I don't have as much practical experience as those I supervise.
Um, so crucial conversation technique. I'm gonna use my hands. Hopefully they don't disappear on your screen. For those of you that remember Karate Kid, like remember the Karate Kid, the movie, like the original, not this Cobra Kai nonsense, but like the original, right? Remember this? Wax on,
On, wax off.
wax off, paint the fence, sand the floor.
Hmm.
So here's how I would recommend you start. Here's my understanding of what it is you want. Here's what I want. Venn diagram. You know where those circles meet in the shaded
Hmm.
area in the middle? Here's what we both want. Let's start the conversation there. Sometimes, and this is in the spirit of transparency, I struggle with the ability to empathize with my children. Like I catch what's happening to me. So when my kids go, Dad, today was a hard day, and then they describe their hard day, are you kidding me? That's not hard. Or my kids go, there's no food in the house. And then I open the fridge and cupboards and there's food in there, then I lose it because I don't empathize with what they inherited. So I think all parties are lacking the ability to empathize with the other. An older generation goes, I don't know why we need to do it your way. We've been doing it this way for 30 years. Nothing bad happened. And you come in with the inability to empathize with that because you just learned a whole new way to do it that you understand is more efficient and effective. And they can't empathize with that. So I'd start with here's what I understand we both want. Well, we see in a lot of our direct area quitting without. Mm. I'm reading Karen's question and honesty. I don't know how to help you understand that characteristic other than you've got a group of people who inherited a practice that is acceptable. Our grandparents, man, if whatever job they got, you expected to have that job till the day you died. They worked at the plant or the mill or the farm for like 60 years. And then my generation comes along and I'm told you'll change jobs 5 times before you find the one you want. Like that was acceptable. To this next generation, you know you don't have to work for anybody, right? We're all in the same space.
Karen, I think it's a really great question and one we obviously think about a lot in our field. I think one of the biggest changes we don't think about is the change of transitions and transitoriness, right? Like there have been times where we didn't move far away from home. People weren't
Yeah.
commuting long distances to work. You lived in the same town that you were going to be in your whole life. You always knew your community members, right? And I think when I think about those things and we work through some of these concepts through our leadership academy here at Anchor, what I would bring to the table and as an and to what Alonzo is sharing is the understanding of the difficulties of a transitory life, right? Think of a tree, right? So a tree gets rooted. When it's rooted in great soil, its trunk can get really strong. The nutrients go up the trunk. It helps build, branches and leaves, and it goes through its own cycles, but there's strength in what it's rooted in and its trunk. You can be like bamboo. where you are highly flexible and don't break when things change. But what if you were just the leaves on the tree, right? And you were moving around and fluid all the time, and that's what you were used to.
Yeah.
Your commitment to the soil that produced the leaf is a lot different. And so I think sometimes it's we don't have to accept what's different all the time. I think we hear that a lot. Like it doesn't have to necessarily make sense to you, but I think asking those questions of what can I do? How can we help? What can we do to make this more efficient? I've been in plenty of classrooms over the years where I am a 20-year veteran educator with scores out the wazoo and tons of kids who have been successful. And I've had to walk in and completely throw out my lesson plans and start from someplace new and say to the kids, what is it we need to do together? Because this isn't working. And people tend to be really afraid sometimes of those conversations. But I think that goes back to what Alonzo was also saying about trust. Um, it's hard to, I don't know. I think when we lead, we make the assumption that we always have to understand, but I don't know if it's understanding as much as it is trying to figure out a path forward, even if it's not something inherent to you.
Yeah, I'm watching the chat and I'm listening to you, right? And so my mom would say the truth is not eloquent. Okay. She would say the truth is not eloquent. Sometimes you got to tell people, you got to stop the music, tell people the truth, and then we can dance again. So I'm going to say something as I understand to be a truth. It doesn't make me right. It's just what I've experienced, and I want to explain it. We are not loyal anymore. We're habitual. We're habitual, right? So once upon a time, I'm going to say we as a people, we were brand loyal. If you're a Nike person, you're a Nike person. If you're an Apple person, you're an Apple person. If you're a Starbucks person, you're a Starbucks person, right? We would, once upon a time, we'd say we were loyal to them no matter what they did. But I'll be honest with you. I only do the same thing every day because it's a habit. But if somebody comes along with a better, more effective, efficient way where I feel valued, I will change my habit in a heartbeat. I'm not expected to be loyal to you anymore. I'm habitual, right? So whether it was COVID that did it, what people inherited is different. I mean, you keep bringing up education. In 2008, we were worried about something that's about to happen right now. And I don't think most people paid attention to it if you weren't in that space. In 2008, when we had a recession, we stopped having babies. You know who that scared the crap out of the most in 2008? Higher education. Who's their customer? Those babies. What if there's fewer babies? You got fewer customers, and every single baby's not going to college. Look how many colleges across the country now are closing due to enrollment, not because their school is bad, enrollment. So there's so many factors playing into this. We're not loyal, we're habitual. And with humility, I think we have to accept that about our employees too.
Hmm.
Come here because it's a habit.
Well, Alonzo, I thank you so much for this really interesting conversation. It's always been great. I
Yeah,
appreciate those of you who stuck it out with us.
you're awesome. Thank you.
I'm sure that you all are walking away feeling like there's a lot to think about because we couldn't give you prescriptive answers to easy takeaways. But I hope that you're able to take something back to marinate on with your teams that makes you pause and be curious next time. And as always, at Anchor, we appreciate you showing up. So, on behalf of Anchor, I wish you all a happy, warm, bright, and loving holiday season. And I look forward to continuing these conversations with you in the new year. And Alonzo, thank you so much for your time. It was great seeing you again. Bye,
Thank you. Thanks,
everybody.
everybody.